Hello and welcome. This is Señor with another one of these commentary videos for you. In this one, as you can tell by the title of the video, I will be talking about what I would consider to be one of the most important things you can do when you're learning a new language. Before I get to that, let's do the gamer nerd stuff here for you. And that is that this is a game of hardcore team deathmatch Black Ops 4 on the map Hacienda Twilight, I believe it's called. I'm running the UAV care package, Sniper's Nest, along with Ghost, Scavenger, and Lightweight, I believe. Attachments are probably a red dot sight, and I don't know what else. So let's get to it. So, for the most part, my students are learning Spanish like I learned Spanish, and that is they come to my class as, for the most of them, a freshman in high school, and they sit down and they start learning Spanish. And that's what I did. I started off at 14 years old in high school, Spanish 1 class. Didn't really have any idea what I was doing because not even in middle school did I have even a little bit of Spanish. Like a lot of times my students will come in and say, oh, we learned how to say the colors in third grade, or I learned the days of the week in fourth grade maybe. Like they have just a tiny bit of background, but I didn't have any background. So if I can get to where I am, starting where my students started, then they can get also to that place as well. And to do that, the most important thing, in my opinion, to help you learn a language is repetition. And repetition can come in many forms. Uh, Ideally, your teacher will set you up with opportunities for repetition. And I'll talk about some of the ways that I give my students opportunities for repetition. Um, the one of the main things that you should do, and you can do this on your own. You don't need your teacher to do this for you, but it is to have a set of flashcards and study them on a daily basis. The more you see and hear and say a word, the more likely you are to remember it in the long run. A lot of people will say that you have to see that word in context, like just seeing the word, I don't know, casa on a piece of paper, which means house, obviously, might have less meaning than if someone were to point at a house and say casa. And that's true, it does have less meaning. But you can remember it just as well if you have that repetition. So if I see the word casa, so let's say I see it my flashcards twice a day for a few weeks, and then in class I hear my teacher say casa. Um, Once a day. We play vocabulary games in class, whether it be charades or a game like Quizlet Live or Gimkit or Quizzes or whatever. Like there's a lot of different vocabulary games out there. Pictionary, doesn't really matter what it is. You're going to see that word again. And then you're going to do, say, practice or homework assignments where you have to use the word casa in a sentence. Or maybe you'll see some pictures and you have to describe what you see in la casa. And you'll just have all of this repetition. And the more you see la casa, the more you hear la casa, the more you speak la casa, the more likely you are to remember that la casa means house. Now, I could have chosen any word for you right now, maybe a word that you didn't know. So let's say I choose the word la grapadora. Right now, my students don't know that la grapadora is a stapler. But again, if I say la grapadora 50 times, la grapadora to them, or maybe not 50 times, but I say it a few times, and then they see La Grapadora on their flashcards, and they see it on a quiz, or they see it on the game in the class, or they draw a picture of it, or whatever it is. They have this repetition. They're going to remember the word. Now, the challenge comes in for the students when they elect to not do that repetition. So they're not studying their flashcards. They're not playing the vocabulary games in class. They're not doing their practice assignments that are given to them by me or by your teacher. It's so much harder for them because they don't have that repetition with them. And with some of the groups on Facebook that I'm on right now, which I'm on a handful of groups with Spanish teachers and stuff, some of them will sit there and argue with you in the face that you have to have the vocabulary presented in what they call an meaningful, it's not meaningful input, it's CI. Dang it, I can't think of what it is. Anyway, you have to give the input in a certain way, the vocabulary in a certain way. So like, if I just tell you that la grapadora is a stapler, that might have less meaning than if I show you a picture of a grapadora and say that it's a stapler. But it's not necessarily true because you can just you can see and you can say it and you can hear la grapadora this a certain amount of times, and eventually it's just going to stick in your head for quite some time. Now, if in a year I ask you how to say stapler in Spanish, there's a good chance you're not going to remember if you have not continued to use that word. So use the words that you're learning as much as you can. And the best way to do that is to, once you get a little bit further in Spanish, as you're learning new things, like let's say you're in Spanish class, you've been there for a few months, and you've learned how to say all this vocabulary to talk about the things that you see in the class, like la pizarra, the whiteboard, or el televisor, the TV, el teléfono, la computadora, escritorio, etc. What you need to do, and you don't have to do this out loud, but when you're seeing these things, just say in your head what they are. So you see the chalkboard, you're like, oh, la pizarra, but you're saying it in your head. You don't have to say it out loud. And then when you start learning how to say sentences, like right now we're learning how to say things that you like me gusta. So you're like, oh, me gusta la computadora, or me gusta el libro, and you're saying these things, just say them to yourself in your head. That will also get that repetition for you, and it will help you remember, now remembering words as well as grammatical structures that you're learning in class. So try to, and it becomes easier as you get further along in the language that you're learning, but try to think in the language that you're learning. You have to force yourself because it's not going to come naturally when you first start going. So this what I used to do when I was still learning, like probably early in college. As I'm like driving home, I'd have an hour-long drive home from college. I would just kind of like either think in my head or I would talk out loud about what I'm seeing happening on the freeway, or what I'm going to do later in that day, or what I did earlier in that day, or what I'm going to do for summer vacation, or just anything random. Things that you might be thinking about anyway, you force yourself to think about it, but you say the things in Spanish. And then as you're doing this along the way, surely enough, you're going to come across something that you forgot how to say. So maybe I'm thinking about the things in the classroom, and I'm talking about them, I'm seeing them, and I forgot, oh shoot, how do I say stapler? How do I say la grapadora? You know, you forget how to say it. Well, then later you go home, you look it up, and you remember. I'm running out of time. Repetition, that's the key. If you guys have questions or a suggestion for something that works really well for you, maybe drop it in the comment section. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video. Hasta luego.